I would like to propose that we examine how, within this changing lexicon of and for our time, the concept of the state has changed, the concepts of the law changed in the context of the war on terror, and how the concept of democracy changed in this very context. Now we have two extraordinary speakers tonight who are going to help us debate this, as I call them, pressure points in the present world. And I would like to invite first Nancy Hollander to speak to us in her lecture. Nancy is a partner of the firm Friedman, Boyd, Hollander, Goldberg, Urias and Ward PA since 1983. Her practice is largely devoted to criminal cases, including those involving US national security issues. She has been counsel in numerous civil cases, forfeitures and administrative hearings, and served as a consultant to the defense of a high-profile terrorism case in Ireland. She also represents two prisoners at Guantanamo Bay, one of which being Mohamedou Ould Slahi, whom she assisted in publishing his bestseller Guantanamo Diaries last year, as mentioned already. Furthermore, she's led counsel for whistleblower Chelsea Manning on appeal. In her 2010 article, A Terrorist Lawyer, and proud of it, she warned that in the light of the war on terror, and I quote, "Those who are shouting the loudest today to limit the rights and protections available to my clients include some who may find themselves on the other side of the law in the future." Thank you, Nancy. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm very grateful and honored to be back at the New World Summit, where I first met everyone in Berlin. I believe it was 2012. And as you know, I come from the United States. The United States is a country that imprisons more of its population than any other country in the world. It is a country that has a military presence in 147 countries in the world. It is a country that has drones flying around, God knows where, killing innocent people. But I do want you to know that tonight I come to you all in peace. And I want to speak about what in English and in the US we call whistleblowing. And I want to talk about what that means, because we use that term and we say he was a whistleblower, she was a whistleblower, and what does that really mean? It means exposing a truth. And it's not just any truth, it's some truth that we all need to know, a secret. And it's not just any secret, it's a secret that we should have known, a government secret, a secret that needs to be out. A secret we should have known because it's something a government did or didn't do or should have done. It's something illegal, immoral, embarrassing to the government or to someone in it. Or maybe it's something hostile or racist or murderous. Or it's just the truth that the government is spying on its own citizens, on foreigners, on other governments, all innocent. All people and organizations the government has no right to spy on. But secrets don't come out on their own. It requires first a person who has knowledge, who knows the secret and is willing to do whatever is necessary to get it out. And it also requires a forum, media, some group or organization or individual who's willing to take that risk. And third, it requires a legal system that will protect that whistleblower. What I want to talk about is what happens when the government hides the secrets and the legal system fails to protect that person. Because exposing secrets that constitute a harm to the public, violations of law, abuse of public authority, fraud, can lead to great harm for the person disclosing the secret. Chelsea Manning told us the truth about human rights abuses and is in jail for 35 years unless we win her appeal. Edward Snowden told us the truth about surveillance, and he can't even come home. Mohamedou al-Salahi, whose writings you see surrounding you, told us the truth about Guantanamo, but no one in the government is listening to him. Telling the truth, exposing a secret's nothing new. We've had this in the United States and other places. Many of us are old enough in this room to remember the Pentagon Papers, for example, and there are many others. And I suppose I should add here that all governments do have legitimate secrets. That's not what I'm talking about. Furthermore, nothing in what I'm saying is classified. Nothing is derived directly, indirectly, or in any other way from classified evidence, even if it's also open source, and even if I think it was classified wrongly, so we get that part clear. But we're talking about illegitimate secrets, secrets that prevent the free society from flourishing, secrets that make us afraid, secrets that keep us from participating in our democracies. Because fundamentally, secrets prevent us from freedom of association and freedom of speech. So let's talk for a minute about Chelsea. Chelsea told us about horrendous acts. We saw videos that we would never have seen if it weren't for Chelsea. Shooting, killing innocent people, and then soldiers laughing about it. She told us things we had the right to know about the prisoners in Guantanamo that most of us, would never have known. Her motive? She was a classic whistleblower. Her motive was to expose wrongdoing. But it didn't matter what her motive was under the law in the United States. Now, she was found not guilty of aiding the enemy, but she was found guilty of many other espionage charges. And espionage in the US, the way the courts interpret it, it doesn't matter why she did what she did. This act, the Espionage Act, was passed in 1917 during World War I. And it was a bad law then, and it was a bad time, but its purpose was to prosecute spies. That's what its purpose was. Well, Chelsea's not a spy. And the 7 other people who've been tried and convicted under the Espionage Act in the most recent Obama administration, they weren't spies either, but they've all been convicted. They're all people who told us things that we had a right to know. But if Chelsea's case stands and we are not successful in her appeal, then anyone who ever leaks a single page of classified information, secret information, national security information that's not even classified, anyone runs the risk of prosecution in the United States. And that includes journalists, which of course is another serious problem. As recently as last week, the Freedom of the Press Foundation discovered through some Freedom of Information Act responses that they received that national security letters that the government sends out to organizations to find out what journalists are doing, these are secret letters. You never know about them. They go to organizations. The organizations aren't allowed to say they got them. But what happened in this Freedom of Information Act is that now we also learn that the rules involving when the government can use national security letters, who they can use them against, how they use them, those rules are secret. So everything's secret. So there's no accountability whatsoever. And without a free press, someone who knows a secret has no way to get it out. So we have to have a press corps that's not afraid. Journalists must not be afraid to embarrass the government. Julian Assange is a journalist. He's afraid to even step out of the Ecuadorian embassy because he's afraid he'll be extradited to the United States where there may be a secret, again, secret indictment against him but he has no way of knowing because it's secret. So he's stuck there because there's no way to know whether he's actually being charged in the United States under the Espionage Act for conspiracy to assist Chelsea Manning to get the documents out. We also have to have a strong and independent legal system, independent judges who will stand up to government abuses. Keep in mind that things are leaked all the time. Governments leak information all the time. You see it in the New York Times, you see it in The Guardian, I'm sure you see it in other papers in other languages, but those are leaks that governments want out, so they just let them out. Nobody gets prosecuted for those. It's what the government wants to hide from us that's important. Recently, a judge in the United States actually did stand up to the government, and it involved what is known as force feeding in Guantanamo. There are some prisoners who have been on hunger strikes, some of them for years, as a protest. And what happens to them is beyond brutal. They are strapped down, there's something jammed up their nose, Ensure is poured in. It's horrible, it's painful, it's humiliating. And one prisoner went to court and said, I want the public to see it because they videotape this. The government, you know, torturers always videotape their torture. They always record it. That's kind of just always happens. And sure enough, they videotape these force feedings. Well, the government said no. And the judge said, why not? And they said, well, it's classified. It's classified. We classified it. You don't get to make any decisions, Judge. We get to decide. Classified. But this is what she said. And this is a quote. What the government is really saying is that its classification system trumps the decisions of the federal courts as to the public's access to official court records. In other words, the executive branch, in this case the military, proposes to be a law unto itself. Those videos will be released. Well, the government's appealed, of course, and we'll see what happens. But at least one judge stood up to the government. Now, I could talk about Chelsea all day, but I'll run out of time. So let me turn to Mahamadou. And it really overwhelmed me when I came in here tonight, and I was just almost reduced to tears to see his writing surrounding us. I hope you'll read his book. It's available in English and 20 other languages. Pick your language. You can find it. It will be out in 6 more as soon as they're translated. I do have a stamp with his signature. If you buy it tonight, you will have his signature. And it's legal. I took it. It's all legal to have his signature. His signature is not classified. He wrote this in 2005, which is when I first met him in Guantanamo. And he actually got angry at me. I wrote to him, I don't know if this will work in but we'll see if it does. I wrote to him and I said, why don't you tell me everything your interrogators have done to you, over the past 2 years, because he'd been tortured. And he was kind of angry at me, and he wrote back and he said, I was tortured for 18 to 20 hours a day for over a year. That's like asking how many mistresses Charlie Sheen has had. So that gives you a sense of Mahamadou. He still has that wonderful humor that they were never able to get out of him, and you'll see it in the book. But he calls this memoir his endless world tour of detention interrogation, and he wrote it while he was in solitary confinement. He wrote it in English, his 4th language, 466 pages, and then we made this into a book with only leaving out about 20% of it. He describes this odyssey, which started when he was home in Mauritania in 2001. He'd already been questioned twice, and he gets a call from the police chief saying, the Americans have more questions. Just come. Drive yourself. You'll be home tonight. And he's never been home since then. And he was subjected to torture in Jordan, in Bagram, in Afghanistan, and then in Guantanamo, where he was the worst tortured in the whole place. For almost 7 years, the U.S. government fought getting this out. However, in 2008, some other NGOs were able to get some information out of the government, and it included quite a bit of information about what they had done to Mohamedou. So finally, I was able to get this book out, and we got it released in 2012, and it was published in 2015. But without this book, we would never know how he felt about what was done to him. It's not enough to just have the facts of his torture. It's what did it feel like to him? And a recent reviewer of his book said that Salahi's diary makes torture into something we can comprehend. It takes the secrecy out of the depths of this horrible prison. So how much has the effort to keep this secret kept him locked up? Guantanamo, as Larry Seams, the editor of the book, has said, must be seen through the prism of a censorship regimen. It was created as a place of censorship in order to allow abuse to happen, and that censorship remained in place to cover up the fact that the abuse had happened and to prevent accountability. And as you will learn if you read this book, Mohamedou is a man who maintains his dignity and his humor. He treats everyone he meets as an individual, good, bad. There are guards who wrote dedications in a book. There's one guard who wrote in a book, Allah always has a plan, I hope you'll get out. If you see some of the covers of his book show him wearing a camouflage hat, that was a gift from a guard. And at the end of the book, written in 2014 in an afterword, he wrote that I hope I can meet the people I've discussed in this book so we can have a cup of tea because we've learned so much from each other. So also my other client, Ibrahim al-Nasri in Guantanamo, is facing the death penalty. He was tortured in black sites in places I can't even tell you, and I can't even describe most of what happened to him because it's still classified. But again, torturers always preserve their work, and there were videos made of his torture. But when a judge in Washington requested them, they were destroyed. So we know they existed, but we know they were destroyed. And the government won't allow me to say what Mr. El-Nasri has told me about his torture. But think about it. Could the government have even considered opening a prison in Guantanamo or in the black sites unless they were secret? Of course it couldn't. Of course it couldn't. Because that's part of the whole process, is that it has to be secret. And that's what allows this to happen. President Obama, a few years ago, made this statement. It's a quote. My administration is committed to creating an unprecedented level of openness in government. Openness will strengthen our democracy, promote efficiency and effectiveness for government. Transparency promotes accountability and provides information for citizens about what their government is doing. Well, isn't that nice? I agree completely. Yes, President Obama. But then we heard from Chelsea Manning and Edward Snowden. And then the Obama administration prosecuted 8 whistleblowers, more than any administration throughout the years since 1917. So what did he mean by this transparency? When are we going to learn these secrets, and how do we get them out if we have governments that hide from us? There's a UN report on promotion and protection of the right of freedom of opinion and expression. It was issued September 8th, 2015. It's really good. And it talks about this problem. It says that institutions that operate in the national security, such as defense, diplomacy, internal security, law enforcement, intelligence, they may have a greater claim not to disclose information than other public bodies, but they have no greater claim to hide instances of wrongdoing. And that's where we have a problem. That's what Mr. Obama failed to say in his statement. So after what happened to Chelsea, to Jeff Sterling, a CIA agent who was prosecuted, to Kyriakou, to the other US whistleblowers, and what's happening to Snowden and Assange, this is a real fear. This is a real fear that people have in the US. In the US, we've had some civil cases, not criminal, that have been dismissed because the government stamped its feet and said, we can't defend because we'd have to disclose classified evidence. The one that most people know about involved a German citizen named Mr. El-Masri. Mr. El-Masri took a trip to Macedonia, was snatched from the Macedonians by the CIA because they thought he was a different El-Masri, and taken to Afghanistan, tortured brutally for 5 months. Well, they figured out pretty quickly they had the wrong guy, but they didn't want anyone to know they had the wrong guy, so they just kept him longer and eventually left him on a mountain in Albania without any papers. And somehow he managed to communicate with the German authorities. He's a German citizen, and they picked him up. And then he got home and he sued the US. Made sense, sued them. He was tortured. He wasn't even the right guy, much less the fact that you're not supposed to torture anybody. So in that lawsuit, the government said, well, he can't sue us because we'd have to disclose classified evidence. And the judge said, well, that's right, and dismissed the case. And it's not the only one. He ultimately, Mr. El-Masri, did bring a case in the European Court of Human Rights and did get some money. Mr. El-Nashri, my client, has also sued in the European Court of Human Rights and also received money. But when you can't even bring a lawsuit because of secrecy, we've really got a problem. And surveillance, which is just another way of talking about spying, it goes hand in hand with secrecy because governments spy on us secretly. So let's be clear about one thing. Surveillance is fundamentally a discipline for surveillance is fundamentally a technology for disciplining and managing populations. That's what it's for. It is always used to destroy dissent. It's the flip side of a lack of privacy. Without privacy, no one can feel safe to dissent. Without dissent, we no longer have a free society, democracy dies, and the rule of law dies. So it's just a domino, and it all happens. Large-scale US surveillance is harming journalists, it's harming the law, and it will destroy freedom and democracy if we permit it to. Just think about this very simple proposition. Should the government know more about its citizens, or should the citizens know more about its government? That's really what it comes down to. In a democracy, it has to be that the citizens know more about their government than the government knows about them. If the government can get a backdoor into our computers, our internet, our emails, our phone calls, our offices, they can also manipulate that data. And they will, if it will stifle dissent. They will manipulate it if it will stifle dissent. If we can't regulate surveillance, it will inevitably disrupt the whole system of justice. Think about how it affects lawyers. I have an obligation to my clients when they come to see me to say, whatever you tell me is confidential. Ethically, I cannot tell anyone. It's the attorney-client privilege. It exists generally in most other countries also. It's one of the oldest privileges we have in the law. But I can't promise my clients that because unless we go outside somewhere, how do I know? I mean, my phone is down here. Who knows who's listening? I hope they're enjoying it. You know, all your phones are in this room. We've got cameras even outside. We have surveillance coming from drones. I've had to fly across the world to meet with clients just so that we could have a safe conversation because we know from Edward Snowden that everything in the United States was being listened to, particularly if it involved a foreign country. Amnesty International did a poll of 13 countries to determine the psychology of mass government surveillance. Very interesting poll. It found that most people oppose surveillance of their citizens, but they're kind of less concerned about foreigners. Interestingly, the two countries most strongly opposed surveillance were Spain and Sweden. Maybe it comes from different backgrounds of both, but those were the best. In the US, not surprisingly, nearly 1 in 3 people believed that our government should monitor foreign nationals but leave the citizens alone. Of course, maybe that's how come we have these dudes in Oregon who have taken over with their guns, because we leave the citizens alone. The US had the highest bias of any country toward its own citizens. And this is generated by a fear that better controls the population, because it makes people fear outsiders. So this is very serious, because the so-called, we hear about this balance between security and privacy. It's a false choice. Governments must always limit their secrets to those truly, truly necessary to protect national security. And national security has to really mean something. It can't just be a moving target that's whatever the government wants it to be. It has to be defined, and it has to be limited. Otherwise, it loses all meaning, and the government can demand that it has secrecy over everything. In fact, in the US, the government has generated so much information as a result of national security that it paints so broad a brush that it finds nothing. Now, I just have a little bit more that I want to tell you, but one thing is that the European Parliament recently passed a resolution, it was in October, urging EU nations to protect Edward Snowden. And I find that very interesting. And I hope the nations in the EU will do that. But that's an understanding that people who disclose information need protection from their own government. They're not at the US, nobody's asked the US to protect him, nor would it. But at least the European Parliament realizes the problem when someone does not have protection against the government's surveillance. So I want to close with something that I think is really important for us to think about. Justice Douglas was an American judge of the United States Supreme Court, and a very famous one. He wrote in 1966, when a lot of the people in this room were not alive. Some of us were. It was 50 years ago. The case was called Osborne versus US. It doesn't really matter about the case. What matters is what he said 50 years ago. And so I want to read that to you. The time may come when no one can be sure whether his words are being recorded for use at some future time, when everyone will fear that his most secret thoughts are no longer his own, but belong to the government, when the most confidential and intimate conversations are always open to eager, prying ears. When that time comes, privacy and with it liberty will be gone. If a man's privacy can be invaded at will, who can say he is free? If his every word is taken down and evaluated, or if he's afraid every word may be, who can say he enjoys freedom of speech? If his every association is known and recorded, if the conversations with his associates are purloined, who can say he enjoys freedom of association? When such conditions obtain, our citizens will be afraid to utter any but the safest and most orthodox thoughts, afraid to associate with any but the most acceptable people, freedom, as we know it, will have vanished. It's up to us, ladies and gentlemen, citizens of the world, as we are, to keep our democracies strong, to keep them open, to keep them transparent, and to keep them fair for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nancy. I would like to propose the following. I have maybe 1.5 urgent questions that I would like to ask now. But there will be an opportunity after that to take some break, coffee, and have a look at the book which you can purchase, the diary. I would assume there is a stamp with the signature available. So that's the opportunity I would not let go of. We will have, as a room, as all of us together, we will have ample time, I promise, to get into depth, into conversation and discussion about this remarkable set of thoughts. But you offered quite remarkable definition of democracy towards the end of the lecture when you talk about surveillance. And you make a distinction between a situation where the government knows more about the citizens. What is more important, when the government knows more about the citizens, or the citizens knowing more about the government? And the latter was considered, in your talk, in your thoughts, a definition of democracy, in a way. Mm-hmm. I'm afraid that that's not the situation we find ourselves in. And as I'm in this search for new vocabularies and, in a way, understanding where we are today, is that other situation where the government knows more about the citizens, is that your definition of the failed democracy that we discuss at this moment, or is it something else you're gesturing towards?
Well, I think that is a sign of a failed democracy, when the government knows more and when there are secrets, and when the people who try to expose the secrets, whatever they are, whether it's Chelsea Manning talking about abuses, whether it's Mohamedou telling us what happened to him, and it takes 7 years to get this out, and by the way, he's still not out, and never been charged with a crime. Those are failures of democracy. There are other failures. Charging people with, keeping people in jail without charge is a sign of failed democracy. That's kind of a different lecture, but it's another sign of a democracy that is failed, because it's failed to provide legal process for people. But I think that in terms of what we're talking about here today, that to me, and what seems to be most overwhelming of all of it, is the surveillance. Because the surveillance and the secrecy are what allow the abuses to happen. Because people get abused and we don't know about it, and people are afraid to speak up about it. Those two things together, to me, are the links that we have to cut if we want to have true democracies.
I just want to return to the article I cited from in your introduction, Terrorist Lawyer and Proud of It. I went to reread the remarkable article, and I just wanted to probe one thing, the notion of terrorism, the way you see it and you understand it. Am I right to suspect that you see a positive dimension, a kind of progressive dimension when it comes to terrorism in this context of the need to challenge the existing conventions, to challenge the current condition of the law in the context of the war on terror?
Well, you know, I'm not in favor of terrorism. I don't think that's how we do it. But when I wrote that article, the point of saying I'm a terrorist lawyer and proud of it was that I was really angry because, and I think it was Vice President Cheney's daughter who had come out and said, these lawyers who represent terrorists, particularly in Guantanamo, they're as bad as their clients. And the point of that, if you read the whole article, the whole op-ed piece that I wrote, it was in the New York Times, you can find it on the web, it's easy to find under my name, was that, I mean, I've represented people who've chopped up little babies, and I wasn't accused of being a baby killer. I've represented people who steal from old ladies, and I wasn't accused of fraud. You know, murderers, rapists. I've represented people who have been accused of and actually done horrendous things, but it was only when representing people who are considered terrorists that somehow I was as bad as my clients. And that was the point of that article. And my concern is that, plus that it's too easy to use the term terrorist without defining what it is. People put Mohamedou as a terrorist, and yet he's never been charged with a single crime, and the chief prosecutor in Guantanamo said, we have no evidence he's ever committed a crime. But there are many people in the United States who say everyone in Guantanamo must be a terrorist. And those are what I was trying to say in that article. Not that I'm in favor of terrorism.
Thank you very much.
Just so we're clear.
We are. I'm really delighted and honored to invite Birgitta Jónsdóttir to take a stand. Unlike what your little booklets say, your booklets say Birgitta is a poet and politician. It's not correct. Birgitta corrected me earlier today. She's a poetician. And you will understand I'm delighted when thinking about new vocabularies about this term. But Birgitta is currently serving as a member of parliament in Iceland for the Pirate Party. She was first elected to the Icelandic parliament in April 2009 on behalf of a political movement, Citizens Movement, the one she co-founded, which aimed at democratic reform via direct democracy, transparency, and accountability. In 2012, Birgitta co-founded the Pirate Party in Iceland. She was the chief sponsor for the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, IMMI, successfully tasking the Icelandic government to make Iceland a safe haven for freedom of information. Birgitta is currently a chairperson for the International Modern Media Institute. She has been an activist and spokesperson for various groups, such as WikiLeaks, Saving Iceland, and Friends of Tibet in Iceland. In her 2015 article titled Democracy in the Digital Era, in the New Internationalist, she argued that, and I quote, "We are living in transformative times, and there are amazing citizens' initiatives occurring all over the world as people are waking up to the idea that they not only can, but need to co-create their societies," unquote. Birgitta, the stand is yours.
Hi, really happy to be in this summit again. I was in Brussels a year ago or 2 years. I completely lost track of time. So can you hear me? Is the mic okay? Yeah. I was talking to Nancy Hollander today as we were preparing for this segment of the New World Order. And we realized, the World Summit, we realized that we both share profound respect for many people, including, of course, Chelsea Manning, but a poet whom I greatly respect, and his name is Lawrence Ferlinghetti. And I had brought with me a book that I edited and published in the wake of 9/11, the beginning of the war on terror, and I felt compelled as an individual that I really had to do something to bring out what we have in common. And I asked Lawrence to contribute to this book, and he sent me this poem, and I want to share it with you, and I want to take the privilege of dedicate this poem, even if I have no authority to do so, to Nancy and her incredible work. To the oracle in Delphi, great oracle, why are you staring at me? Do I baffle you? Do I make you despair? I, Americus, the American, brought from the dark in my mother long ago, from the dark of ancient Europe. Why are you staring at me now, in the dusk of our civilization? Why are you staring at me as if I were America itself, the new empire, far greater than any in ancient days, with its electronic highways carrying its corporate monoculture around the world, and English as the Latin of our day? Great oracle sleeping through the centuries, awaken now at last and tell us how to save us from ourselves and how to survive our own rulers, who would make a plutocracy of our democracy in the great divide between the rich and the poor, to whom Walt Whitman heard America singing, "O long silent Sibyl, you of the winged dreams, speak out from your temple of light as the Sirius constellations with Greek names will stare down on us as a lighthouse moves its megaphone over the sea. Speak out and shine upon us the sea light of Greece, the diamond light of Greece, far-seeing Sibyl, forever hidden. Come out of your cave at last and speak to us in the poet's voice, the voice of the four-person singular, the voice of the inscrutable future, the voice of the people mixed with a soft, wild laughter, and give us new dreams to dream, give us new myths to live by." Written 2001. And I felt this poem couldn't be more fitting for this conversation today. Now, I encourage you to go and read Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He is from the Beat generation. He has an amazing bookstore with incredible books from all over the world in San Francisco called City Lights, where you can nurture your soul and spirit. Okay, so we are talking about the failed state, and Nancy went deeply into the failed governance state through massive surveillance and the fact that the rule of law does only apply for some. So there is no rule of law. So the rule of law can be hacked by the 1%. And it certainly applies to the rest of us. And that is, for me, a definition of a failed democracy. Now, one of the things I've realized since I started to think about my community, my country, the countries around me, the world, that we have utterly and totally failed to respect our own power. We have totally and utterly forgotten to claim our own power. For like Nelson Mandela said a long time ago, that it's the fear of claiming our power that makes us paralyzed to do change. And he said it much better than I did. I'm very bad at remembering quotes. But What can we do about it? Can we just take it? Probably not. There were some dudes in Oregon trying to take something that they believed that were theirs, and it failed miserably, understandably. But the reason why I got into, the belly of the beast, into Parliament, was really to render the need for Parliament, because I'm an anarchist in my heart, but I'm pragmatic, and I understand that not everybody wants to put the work in. So I want to ask you, are you willing to put the work in to co-create your community? How many of you are willing to actually put the work in? Because if you want to live in real democracy, it really rests on you. There is nobody going to come and save our democracies unless we put the work in it. Democracy really just means the rule of the people, the rule of us. And it's failed because it is no longer the rule of the people. To hand over our power to politicians whom in themselves have no power. Parliaments are absolutely powerless. Who controls our communities and our societies and this so-called state? It's not the parliament. It's the bureaucratic body, it's the people that are always in the ministries, no matter which minister comes in. How many of you have seen Yes, Minister? I urge you to see it. It's supposed to be a comedy, but it's actually a documentary. But it's basically about how the bureaucrats, the assistants in the ministries are the ones that run the ministers. And I've seen it. And I've seen the army of lawyers in the ministries saying to the ministers who want to, do the right thing, if you do this, the state is going to be reliable. Do you really want to do that? And the minister is like, no. I have become very passionate about making the parliament stronger, because the parliaments are currently the only link that we have between the general public and power. And so what I've seen since I got into Parliament, I've been there for almost 7 years. I've never had a permanent job this long in my life. And as many of you who might be artists know that it's not easy to be in this traditional routine of 9 to 5. And can you imagine sitting at committee meetings for hours, listening to very stupid people? I should actually be giving an award for my patience. Anyway, so I realized while I've been inside the belly of the beast that there are plenty of tools and there are plenty of ways. And to render or take the power from the executive branch, and this idea of majority rules. I mean, it's like, who the hell invented that? So the majority rules, and there might be like 51% majority and they still rule. And so what about all the other people that voted for whatever other parties? It's just a facade, and it's like the emperor that doesn't have any clothes, and he still thinks he has clothes, but he doesn't. And I've discovered that the most powerful people in the parliament, apart from the ministers that just come in and tell their parliamentarians, yeah, this is the party line, and you vote with the party line. And most constitutions actually say that we are supposed to, as representatives, to vote with our conscience and our heart. But nobody ever does that. They maybe allow one sort of dissident, if it's a very big majority, to say the things that the people might want to hear. So the big question that we are going to be asking ourselves this weekend is that, does democracy work? What other models are there? Are there other models than democracy that are better? I mean, it would be very easy to just run our democracies or our countries like a company. Just get an executive and do it. Well, I got news for you. It's already like that. So who writes the bills? The person that writes the bills, nobody knows, because it's many people, and it's usually the lobbyists and the stakeholders that write the bills. And I remember I got a phone call once from a colleague or a friend that I used to be in web development and stuff like that in the old days, and he said, yeah, like I'm running this drone company now, and the ministry called me and asked me to write a bill about how to regulate drones. And I was like, what the fuck? But that's how it is, and people think it's so normal that they don't even think about it. And there's also supposed to be this 3 division of power, and that doesn't really exist either. And of course, like, I can't really speak about how things are in the United States because it's like some alien, well, it's like a sci-fi book. It reminds me of some of the sci-fi books I've read because it's just so out there. I mean, it's like this dystopian sci-fi story, and I'm always so shocked when I realized how draconian the system has become there. And I had experience of it myself when the Department of Justice wanted to, you know, take off my inner clothes and check out my home by going through the back door of my home, which is the internet. And it's much more invasive than ever going actually into the physical home. And many people don't understand this, but I tried to fight them through the US justice system. I got lawyers from great civil liberties unions like the ACLU and EFF, and of course we knew we would lose. There was no way in hell that I was going to be able to protect my data because it was associated with WikiLeaks, and there was a war on WikiLeaks, like all the wars on war on war on war, and it's like saying war on fear. It's bizarre. I used to live in the States, and I had to leave because I didn't want to raise my son in the culture of fear. And that's how they win. They make you paranoid and fearful, and so I've just decided I'm not going to participate in this encrypting all my life and constantly being worrying about what the government might know about me. You know, bring it on. I know if they want to take me down, they'll take me down. I'm not going to spend more time trying to have encrypted phones and encrypted emails that I lose the passwords to and blah, blah, blah. So as we should actually make it should be the norm in our browsers and, you know, with our emails, but the geeks, they never think of user interface. So, but I'm more concerned about the totalitarianism that we are experiencing from the big corporations, and in particularly by the self-proclaimed largest democracy on planet Earth. Who is that? What is that? Tell me. Do you know what the biggest community and democracy in the world is? Do you know where it is? Any? Exactly, says the creator of the Constitution of Facebook. You should have a look at it at the exhibition down the road. So Facebook, they truly believe that they are the largest democracy in the world. And they get to control it just like Lawrence Ferlinghetti said in his poem. It has become a corporocracy or plutocracy where we have no idea who makes the rules. The rules are changed every day to tweak it so that they can figure out more about our social behavior in order to sell our soul. So Facebook is the devil incarnated. Anyway, 25%. Everybody below 25% in Iceland, according to a new survey, don't believe in God, so we're doomed. Anyway, so Facebook democracy, Google, Microsoft, Sony, Disney democracy versus what type of society? Now, I come from a tiny island with 331.321 thousand people. It's an island in the middle of nowhere. And thank God for the internet, or I would probably had committed suicide a long time ago from boredom. And I'm saying this like I have a lot of relatives that have killed themselves. So, not because there wasn't Facebook. what I believe is, and that's one of the things that the Pirate Party, and that's one of the bizarre reasons why the Pirate Party is scoring, between 35 to 42% in the polls in Iceland. Bizarre, yes. And by the way, I don't want to be a prime minister. Please don't ask me to be a prime minister. It's the most boring job on earth. I want to strengthen the parliament. I'm very serious about that. I really want to strengthen the parliament. And I find it to be bizarre that parliamentarians do not have any assistant personnel to help them through this pile of work that we have to do, whereas the ministers get to have a whole ministry to write laws for them that we never know what's in them. I created a political movement that is, it's not a pyramid, it's not a line or horizontal, it's more like a circle of power where we rotate responsibilities in such a way that we don't take the responsibilities or the power that comes with the title seriously. So how many of you know the anarcho clowns? Do you know what the anarcho clown is? Anarchist clowns? It's the clowns that go and dance in front of the police and soldiers in protests. When you do that, when you smile in front of power and you don't take it seriously, it's a lot easier for the others to move forward because they're so busy looking at the clowns. So we want to introduce a new way of doing things, and that is to, for example, in Iceland, we created a new constitution in the wake of the crisis. A beautiful constitution that's modern, has so many things that I feel good in my heart to have in a constitution that would be sort of a social agreement, because a constitution is only a social agreement. That's why the constitution of Facebook is so creepy, because none of you knows what that constitution entails. So the people of Iceland created a constitution by and for the people, so it's the people's constitution. And of course the politicians got in the way, so it's not been made into law yet. So when we started to go up in the polls, as an experiment, I took the liberty and said in a TV interview that I would only want to do two things if we would get to go into power. And that was to legalize the new constitution that is in a coma now, and offer the people a national referendum on if they want to carry on with the EU bid or not, or to in the process of applying to EU membership. Now, the people of Iceland don't really want to join the EU, but they want to take an informed decision. So they want to see what the EU has to offer before they say no. And I like that. I think it's very important that we as citizens have access to information and that we take informed decisions. And that's why I'm so scared of Google and Facebook, because they're creating algorithms with a really monotonic culture where we only get stuff that we like. So we don't have space for critical thinking, and our behaviors already started to change. So in the future, if we are going to be uninformed peoples from various countries and stateless or state people, the only way we can keep those in power and those that we trust to look after our collective interests is to have information and to open governance. And I think that is a really good first step. First we open up, then, or first we give the people the right to have influence if we stay in power or not. Then we open up the entire governance. And then we put all that information into the public domain in such a way that people understand it. Because anybody that's ever gone to the EU Parliament's website know that they are just drowning you with incomprehensible information that is completely useless if you don't speak, what do they call the language of the bureaucrats in Brussels? There's a special name for it. They speak Brussels, bureaucrat. What did you say? Yes, exactly, Brazilian. And so We need people that are creative. We need people that are willing to go for a short period of time inside the systems to understand them. And that is my service. I went inside, and I'm not going to stay for long. I'm willing to take, to encourage the people to trust us to do a short term to legalize the most important thing that's ever been done in our history, which is this new constitution. And I say it's the most important thing because it is the first time ever that the Icelandic people got an opportunity to express who they are. And because we just have a recycled Danish constitution that, like, we just took out the king and put a president in. And they have actually fixed their constitution. Ours is still a temporary one. So anyway, I think we're in an evolutionary process. Even if the war on terror is frightening, and even if Europe is being taken over by really creepy fascists, remember that in Iceland, even if we are few, we're trying to set an example for you. So if the Pirate Party, come on, a party with the name Pirate and with like somebody like me is bigger, twice as big in the polls as the traditionally most popular party in Iceland for decades, then there is hope. And so, I mean, create something. You don't have to call it pirates. I mean, like, they created a really interesting party in Denmark called the Alternative Party. So, I mean, it's not about a franchise. It's about making it clear that we, the people, want to have power and want to have access to power, and those that go inside are only meant to be in there for a short period of time, because as soon as you become a part of the establishment, you're finished. As soon as you start to respect power, you're finished. So I'm telling you, I don't really give a shit if I don't have this job tomorrow. I do not care, and that is my greatest freedom, and that is the sort of people you need to select and find and encourage them to go in and take a temporary role of transforming the laws, because we are currently stuck in that framework. So, I mean, the only way to get out of democracy, if you don't want democracy or plutocracy or whatever we call it, you have to change the laws to free us. Because I don't know how many revolutions I've seen. There are so many revolutions I've seen. We had a revolution in Iceland, but it didn't have any evolutionary process. So, they elected the same people that, made Iceland have the third largest financial crisis in the world, in the history of the world. And they elected the same people. And now they're going to privatize the banks again. But people are now protesting through the polls by saying that they, trust the pirates better than any of the others. And that, I think, is an interesting expression. And I am hoping that this interesting expression is not something that is just a temporary thing, and then they will, believe all the lies again before elections. We have made a decision. When we started to become popular in the polls, we said, I mean, we're really scared. This is really freaky. So we said to ourselves and to everybody else, we're not going to change a bit. We're not going to try to speak to different demographies, oh, there's not enough women supporting us, so let's speak in this way. So we don't do that. And I think it's important just to not try to speak into what you think is power. My greatest role and my greatest compass in my work, and it's always been, I was just reading I didn't have any more copies of this book. I gave them all to a college in the United States. And I was reading the prologue that I had written back then in 2001, and it's exactly the same stuff that I'm saying now. And so I want to encourage you to understand that we have to both fight for the stuff that Nancy was talking about in her speech, our privacy, and it's something that I've done a tremendous amount of work in and specialized in. But we also have to fight for our own inspiration to do something And I say it again, there is nobody gonna save you except yourself. And so go save yourselves, start thinking about the future you wanna have and the societies you wanna live in, and talk about it. Talk about it with one another during this weekend. Let's talk about the future we wanna create together. And let's not be afraid of crazy ideas. Thank you very much.